swap out for other ones. But okay, let us go over to my brand here and just close this out for a second. I want to walk through my vMix setup and talk about how I have things currently kind of configured. And the way I'm going to do that, this is going to be really bizarre, is I'm going to share this screen, which is and I'm going to eliminate. This is this is interesting. So I'm going to change the desktop settings. Sorry, let's go down to this source. We're going to open up settings. And for today's sake, I'm going to turn off this layer because you can pretty much see all of that. Okay. So here is my vMix setup, and it looks really strange seeing all of this kind of like it's a mirror in a mirror in a mirror. But anyways, so here's the vMix setup. This is basically how I run my show. And the audio thing is all jacked up here. It's not normally that big. But this, I have everything broken up into these like subcategories. So I have my overlays, which is basically my countdown timer that I use for the beginning of the show. There's an overlay in there. And actually, there's another overlay that's missing, so I'll find that one. My start and stop screen, so starting and ending of the show, that's where these two are. And these are just straight up pictures. Okay, so I'm not doing anything special with those other than adding the overlay for the countdown on the start stream. But there are some shortcuts that are on there, like triggering audio and music and that sort of thing. So there are those options that are embedded in each of these sources. Bumper videos is the BirdDog Live's starting show. So, I have a little basically intro video that runs that has several of you guys actually on it. But I have both of those intros, the original, which is this, and then the BirdDog Live one, which is that. And that is, and then there's a Snacks on Stream bumper, which will run when we have Snacks on Stream. But that's where that is housed. All of the BirdDog commercials that are here, and including some other ones that are like different, but all of our commercials that I run, so the X120 or We Are BirdDog, Video Wall, those, and even the BirdDog stories, those are all in a folder together. And then I have my camera sources. So all of the cameras, I got 5 shots basically that I use. And I've built these as layered sources. And these are the things that I'm calling when I'm changing things on the X keys. These are the sources that I'm calling. And I've kind of like been on the fence about the way that this is organized, because I'd like to just have camera sources themselves in their own folder, and then to create basically another tab that would let me do to build scenes essentially with the inputs that I have. So that's kind of today's function. Of course, audio sources, I don't want to forget that, but I've got various audio sources here in this pile. So the RE20, obviously, music from VLC, my sound effects channel, which is
excellent,
all of the sound bites that come in on that. And that's actually a like a cable input. That's a digital cable input. So you can tell the sound effects play out of this output. And then I link that output here in vMix. So it doesn't play on the desktop. It doesn't play out of the main speakers. It plays over that cable output. And then that cable output is here. The Seinfeld transition that I use for sometimes when we cut to the main screen. Oh, and I realize you can't see me. Sometimes when we cut to the main screen, that's just that straight up sound effect. This is microphone 2, which is on my table here. There's a second cable, and that is input 2 on the Euphoria UMC4404 HD. That is input 2. Now, that changed recently because originally the software for the Behringer Euphoria stuff was channels 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 were inputs. So you had 2 inputs on the thing. Now you can individualize them as 1 through 4. And it may have been that I had an older firmware that wasn't correctly set up, very likely. But I could have also updated recently when I got the Stream Dudes machine, and now they enable individual channels. So this is channel 1, and then my shotgun microphone, which currently isn't set up for this rig, is out of 2. So if I wanted to add a second microphone, a different style of microphone, I could do that on channel 2, 3, or 4, and it would look just like, just like this here. And then the Among Us sound effect, which sometimes gets played when we go over to the desktop screen as well. So those are both muted right now. And then the last tab that I have is the lower thirds, and these are those actual overlays that get triggered. And so lower thirds, overlays, these should probably all be in the same queue right now, because that's what they are. So let's actually change that. I'm going to change this to pink, general, and then pink, and then done. And so now under lower thirds, we have 4 elements in here that we're using. Countdown, the overlay 1, overlay 2, and then the actual time code that I was using the other day for testing purposes. So that's all of my things coming into vMix. That's how I've kind of organized them to keep them separate but quickly referenceable. And then, like I said, I'm switching between actual camera sources when I am, calling cameras. And so this is going around and actually calling different sources. The desktop source is Scan Converter. Okay, so it is running Scan Converter on this screen, which is running in 1080p, and it's a little bit stretched for the size of that screen, but that's okay. All right. So that is the general idea. Now, what I want to do is I want to create another tab, essentially, and call this outputs, because all of these are essentially inputs. They're all scenes or sources or whatever, and I want to primarily use layering on a separate, what would be called an input, but basically creating them as scenes that I can call, and then I can link those to my X keys unit as scene 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So right now, this is camera 1 is the P200, camera 2 is the 110, 3 is the P4K, 4 is my overhead 100, and then 5 is the desktop, and 6 is the starting screen. So we want to, the issue is that I'm building on the input layers of the cameras to do each of these. And so in some cases, for example, like this, the P200 is sitting on top of the P100. And that's okay, except it shows 2 previews here on the screen. And so when I cut over to that, now you can see that previews 1 and 2, or I'm sorry, 1 and 5 are lit up because the 200 is also on this screen. So that's confusing, right? So I want to, now this is interesting that 1 doesn't light up, and that may just be a configuration issue, but 1 should light up. It should be lit up in both regards because the 200 is on both. Actually, the 200 is technically not on this one. Oh, you know why? Because the 200 on the desktop scene is a layer, but it's not on. That's why. Interesting. But here you can see that both 1 and 5 are in preview. Yeah, because camera 1 is selected anyway. So anyway, and now it's 1 and 4 because the previous shot is overhead and the P100 overhead and the P200. So what the problem is that when you hit a button like that and 2 of them light up, you don't actually know which one you're on. So I want to create basically outputs and then link them as source 1, source 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And essentially they will be really the same, but it gives you the option to customize them at that point. So that's what we want to do. Now, let me not neglect the chat too much here, and I will switch back over and make sure that I'm all caught up. Yes, okay, so we're all caught up here in the chat, which is great. So now let's go back to what happened here. All right, so let's go to this. All right, and let's build that now. Okay, so let's go up to settings, which is up here in the corner, and it's gonna open this up. This is kind of like our general information. So we're gonna click through some of these and just see what options we have here. Where is the option? Actually, I think it's not on this screen, is it? Where is it that you customize those? Okay, so it's not here. So we're going to cancel. And we're going to right click. There it is. And now I'm going to select a new layer. And I need my keyboard back. Now I'm going to I'm going to call this outputs for now. I'm not thrilled with that name, but I'm going to call it that. And we're going to change the desired color. And you have to, okay, vMix should not be a double click. Okay, if you click it once, it does nothing. If you click it twice, it opens. Should not be a double click. It should be a single, but anyways, whatever. So let's see what color I'm not using. I'm using red, green, yellow, purple, blue, 2 blues, and a pink. So I'm going to use like a bright green because this is kind of like the sources you want to use in the show. So there we go. All right, outputs are here. So now we want to build our scenes based on our inputs, right? So we're going to actually start building blank inputs. And inside here, we're going to layer these up. So we're going to open up the settings. We're going to hit layers. And then I'm just going to select, for the P200, I'm just going to select layer 1. And I'm going to say P200, which is down here. All right? And that's all I want in layer 1. All I want is P200. And I want to probably change the name. You should be able to quickly change the name too, but say P200 out so I can differentiate B2. Actually, you know what? I don't need to do that because the source, the actual input for the P200, which is what this is not called P200, right? It's called the source name of the P200, which is NDI BirdDog-Studio-P200 cam. So now all my inputs can get cleaned up because I can put them all in order as I want them, first of all, but I can label them exactly as I want them as well. So I like that. I like that idea. I'm going to make another one. And we're going to go here and we're going to say this is going to be called P110. And we're going to say layers and we're going to say layer 1. I want this to be the P110. All right, good. So far, so good. Now, I see the chat moving, and so let's find out how it is that you might change. Can you record all of your input sources individually to an external location, like a hard drive, or is vMix still limited on only being able to record 4 inputs in the multicorder? Oh, that's a great question. I know that multicorder is a thing. I don't know how many sources you can do. We could probably find out just as we take a brief pause here and go to settings, recording. Oh, that doesn't actually tell us, eh? So somebody in the chat will have to help us out here with that because it looks like that information is not under the recording option, which you would think it is. Okay, so let's keep going here. So source 1 and source 2 are done. Here, I'm going to call, oh, I'm sorry, this is P4K. And we're going to call it P4K. All right. All right, so now we've got, 34, 35, 36. This is nice now because they're all in sequential order too, which will be helpful when we reprogram the X keys through Companion. All right, let's add another source. Now, source number 4 is my overhead, my P100 overhead with my talking head in the corner, right? With the P200 layer. So what we want to do here is I'm going to create a new input, blank. Oh, I made 2 already. Whoops. Oh, no, don't do that. Cancel that. Okay, cancel that. Thank you. All right, so here, we're going to call this P100, or we can call this overhead, because that's the camera, and maybe we'll give it a little subtitle. And then we say layer. And here, what I want to do here is I want to select a different layout. So I want this layout, and I want the background to be the P100 overhead, and I want the one in the corner to be my P200. Now, I'm already there, but that's because the source already has that. And so if we do this number, Now you can see that I'm doubled up here, right? So what we need to do is we need to go back to cameras and we need to eliminate any of those guys that I'm sneaking in the corner right here. So we could just change this now to none. And now that raw source is that overhead camera. Okay, so now if I go back to my output and I say P200 overhead, there I am. Okay, so now I'm here in the corner again. I'm a little off center and I'm taking up a little bit too much of the room. I'll show you how to change that because it's super easy. We go here and we say position and we say input number 2. It's nice that it gives us the name. And we can pan and tilt any way that we want. Okay, so we can move ourselves around and put ourselves wherever we want to. The other thing that we need to do, though, is probably crop this picture a little bit so that I'm not taking up a ton of space. Whoops. So let's make this a nice, pretty much even square. And then I'm going to drag this over to the corner. And, whoops, other way. And then put myself down here in the bottom. So that most of the image from the input 1 is going to be exposed, right? All right, so that's good. I like that a lot. I think that's a good copy of the overhead. And then input 5 is going to be the desktop. And so here we're going to say layers and multi-view. I again want to do, actually, let's be real smart about this. To create consistency across the whole board, I am going to, whoops, not do that. Can I? All right, so I want to copy this. That's what I want to do. I want to create a duplicate, right? And I think there's got to be a way. Let's find out. Okay, not on this menu. And is it here? Is it, where could it be? Where could it be? Close. Switch this. More? There's got to be a way. All right, somebody in the chat, how do you duplicate a source? I'm going to close these other ones because I keep right-clicking and it's really annoying, but advanced, general. I'm not entirely sure, actually. But if you could duplicate it, then obviously you would be able to get consistency. Oh. You'd be able to get consistency across image sequencer, images, audio, visuals, virtual sets. Okay, not in here. All right, somebody. Only John can put John in a corner. What's going on, JB Tech? Welcome back. Don't be sorry for interrupting. Always happy to take questions while we go here. I love vMix, but just got a Director Mini from Magewell, so I can have a portable mini rig. X120 should be sweet paired with it. Can you remind me, does cam control work for auto follow on P200s? Yes, there is a tracking function in cam control for the P200 as long as you're on the latest. All right. I feel like I should be able to copy and paste this, but I can't find an immediate way to do that. So we're going to make another blank, and I'm going to go, this one is my desktop, so I want to use this feature, and I want to say desktop, which is nice that it's already there, and I want to say P200 because that is my go-to main camera, so that's this one here. Now, one thing that I could do is I could just copy the settings from, what did I do there? Okay. So I could copy the settings. So let's close this down for now. Open this up and say position So 277, 1473. So 277 and 1473. Okay, so that has given me that. And then I need to move it. And so the position, oh geez, is I may need to write this down. 0.78, I'm sorry, 0.798 negative 655. 0.798 655. 0.798, and this is negative 655. Boom. Okay, so now, see, the reason for this is I want to provide consistency between these two shots, right? So here, if I cut between them, I don't want my image to like move around. I want it to be the same on both. So that would be a duplicate. That would be really nice if I could duplicate that somehow. But that is now, those picture in pictures are now consistent. So this one, I'm going to have to call this one desktop out for now because I actually have another source that's called desktop, the original. So let's actually change that. That's under camera sources. See how it's called desktop here? So I'm going to say desktop in on this one, and then I'll call the other one desktop because that's what I want. Okay, so now we can say, oh, you know what? I'm going to leave it as desktop out because then it differentiates between the input and the output just by saying in and out. So I'm going to leave that. All right, and then now I have the luxury of kind of picking whatever I want for input 6 because remember that input is just stream starting, and I don't know necessarily. I used it this morning. It was convenient, but it's not something that I'm going to use. That set of buttons is really not going to get used very often. So we can create that for anything, but I would not probably create a background, an output background. I would leave it as is. And so all my outputs, that I want to use need to be here, but these are all sources, These are all inputs essentially, and I want to program these as outputs. Okay. So I've got that set. Now, I should also mention, inside the camera sources, I've got some automations that I probably need to be conscious of, right? So some triggers or things like that. Let's go down to the 200. I'm going to look at triggers. Here I have, when I switch to the P200, I do a check basically that the microphone is on. Now, I don't really need this anymore because I have a red light in front of me showing me whether I'm on or off. So I don't need to actually have this transition on the main camera, which is fine. We don't need to, I don't need to worry about that too much. Let's go ahead and look at what other triggers though we have. So audio on. So again, make sure that my microphone is on, the Among Us sound effect, and to make sure that the sound effects channel is actually on. Again, these three probably don't need at this point, so we're going to delete those. And the reason why I'm cleaning these up at this point is because we're not going to use these as sources going out live. I'm going to use the outputs now for that function. So I just want to make sure, though, there's nothing unique. Like the sound effects thing is mostly just to double check to make sure that cable, that digital cable is on at any time. Okay, so it's just a checks and balance. Same thing with this microphone is I didn't have a button that was feeding back the information whether or not it was working. So it wasn't a glitch. Don't adjust your headsets. So we want to, now that I have that feedback here, I can see it in front of me that the microphone is muted. I don't necessarily need it, and I certainly don't need it on the inputs. So that is my next step. So that one's clear. That one's clear. Whoops. Sorry, everybody. Hey, there's the map if you're interested. That one's clear. And let's load that again. And then the last one is the P4K. Okay, so yeah. Overlay in and out. This is when I was trying to do overlays, so we can get rid of those things. Delete, delete, delete. Okay, so that is all good. And now I'm going to go back to see my UMC, for example, is here, and it shows that it's going out the master, but it's not going into my ear. If I wanted it to go into my ear, I could patch it that way by going down here and saying play in the A output, which is it's now playing in or was playing in my ear, and that's really annoying. So now the outputs, this is now the new thing. All right. Somebody on YouTube suggested that instead of putting input and the number, which is what we did in Companion yesterday. So let me put this over here now, and I'm going to switch back to my main view. Make sure that you guys can see and hear me again. Okay, so what was suggested is that inside Companion, let me pull this over here now on the desktop. That I use the name of the input instead of the number of the input. All right. So here we go. We're back in Companion. And I don't know. I haven't done this before, but when I click on preview, see how it's blue, but it also lights up this little bar when I press the button. So if I click on that and I change the input, if I were to change the input to the short name, which is now P200, okay, the idea is that it should call that. So if I change this and then call this, it actually does call that source now. Okay. So let's change another one. Like this one should be P110. And the idea is that if you have to change if the input numbers change, it doesn't jack up all your buttons. It stays with the input because the name is the same, which is why I like the simplified name. And so here, if I press input 2, it is now, however, it is not, why didn't it did not pull it up in 35 as in, doesn't show it in tally. Let me look. Is the camera called P? It is. Okay. So let's go back here. General cam. And I'm going to change the input now to cam. And I'm also going to do that with the rest of my sources that, like P4K cam, because we're duplicating inputs, right? So P4K cam, P100, P110, P100 overhead, desktop input, and then the long P200. Okay, so those are my 5 sources. So now when I load preview 2, it says cam, and here I want to change this to interesting. It doesn't like that. It doesn't like that. And maybe, so if I change this to input 35 and I call it, oh no, it didn't do it either. Fascinating. Why is desktop out? Oh, it's just here. Okay. So yeah, if I want to give this a go. Input 35. If I hit enter, no, still doesn't do it. If I turn it off and back on again, preview 2 is lit, but it shows P110 cam. All right, so if I were to change this, you know what? I'm going to save this. That's what I'm going to do. So if and then I'm going to restart BitFocus. That's what I'm going to do. So there's been a problem. Uh-oh. Okay, so hey everybody. Oh, that was weird. My tell script went offline. Oh, She's struggle bussing. Oh no. What's going on here? I just lost the P200 for some reason, and it just reset. Interesting. That's fascinating. What could that be about? I wonder. So if I preview, still didn't change it to input 35, even though, oh. Ah, that did it. Okay, so companion needed to be restarted, essentially. And now I'll cut this over. This is the P110 source, whereas this is the P200. So now we're swapping inside of there. Okay. Hey, P200's all out of whack now. And I need to reposition that apparently. So let's do that. P200. Yoink. All right. And then looks like maybe the exposure got changed potentially, but yeah, because it's definitely darker than it was. So maybe I'm a little too close. One fun fact is that you can right click inside vMix, the P200, and then say configure source. And so then it will open up the web UI for that. So if I say cam control and I open up this a little bit and I compare it to the other shots. Huh. Should be 60. So this is an interesting discovery. I don't know if it's related or not. I think that's better. Okay. Let's go back here. An interesting discovery. You know, I have a support related P200 here. And so there's lots of things that are going on with it. But one of them is that it doesn't recall the iris correctly. So it's kind of annoying. All right. So if I load preview 2 into the camera, if I load this P110, why didn't it give me feedback? Ah, because you have to change it here too. There it is. Okay, so if I load that and then cut that, that's working. And I can show you that here on the actual desktop. Excuse me, the desktop. That when I load preview 1, see the new output P110 is now in preview. And if I hit go over, now you can see it's in red behind my head here, right? So that is actually communicating. So when you make these changes, you'll need to restart Companion in order to reinitiate all of the information. So I saved and then I restarted Companion and now we're up and running. So let's go back here so that we can get into, so we got to do all of this here. So let's start with preview 1 and program 1. So the P200 and the feedback, it needs to be P200. Okay. And then program 1 is here. And we need this to say P200. P200. And feedback. Why is that? P2. Oh, shoot. Is that program 1, preview 1? Yeah, okay. So those lights are working. Oh, but program 1 here just called the wrong camera. Ugh. Yeah, it called the wrong camera. So when I click here for some reason, and maybe I need to reload this. When I click on program 1, I have it as input P200, which is the name of the source. Feedback input P200. When I load it, it loads the P200, but when I program it, it loads the other one. It loads the input. So there's something going on with, program 25, which is this one. Ah, geez. All right, so this is program 1. And this is supposed to be P200. and this is supposed to be P200. So now if I load that, now that's the correct source. Okay, got it. Clear as mud. Okay, cool. So preview 1 and program 1 were mislabeled, which is confusing. But now preview and program for both action and feedback are correct. All right, so now we do that again with program 2 and preview 2. So program 2 is this one. And okay, so these are the two buttons. Always check your buttons, I guess, before you do any of that. So this should be called P110 because that's the second source, and you change it both on action and on feedback if you're using an X keys. And then again here, we're going to change this P110 and feedback P110. So now they're both correct inside of the system. Great. So let's go number 3. All right, so this is calling the P4K. So program 3 is here, and we're going to call this P4K. And program 3 is here, which is labeled program 1 for some reason. So let's show you this. So this should be program 3. And here we're going to call this P4K. Whoops. P4K and feedback. I want that to relay P4K, tally information, action and tally. And then here, 3 P4K and feedback should be P4K as well. So now when we hit number 3, I have preview tally on the X keys. And then if I hit program, the source is being called correctly, and I'm seeing tally reiterated on there. So that's good. Okay, number 4 is my overhead camera, is this one. And this is the wrong source because obviously you can't see my face, right? The other one, we put my face in the bottom corner. And so, and I supposed to put my face in the bottom corner of this one too. Boom. Okay, so for the overhead camera, it's called overhead and then brackets P100, which might be an advocacy for keeping your naming simple if you're configuring it this way. So let's just call this P100. All right? Because there's just too much room for error. So if I've changed the name, then what's the rule? We need to restart BitFocus. Okay. So I'm going to go here. And there we have restarted. So now if I'm clicking on input 4, all right, this is preview 4 and program 3 is what it's claiming to be. So preview 4, and this one should be called 4 as well. Okay, now we got our apples in a row here. And I'm going to change this to P100. And I'm going to say feedback P100. And then program 4, I'm going to say P100. And I'm going to say feedback P100. All right. So now if I load this, if I load this in preview 4, it is my overhead P100. And if I cut it over, that tally light turns on, meaning that it's responding back to it's in program. So that's working correctly. Good news. Now let's go to, let's go and bring this across. Okay, so the last one is this image that we're looking at right here. And right now it's calling desktop input, and I want to change it to desktop output. So I'm going to click the button, and that is preview 5 and program 5. We've now figured out that that's how it's mapped. And I had a revelation, which isn't much of a revelation, I should say. But this source needs to be called desktop out. Desktop out, like this. And we'll spell it correctly once, and then we'll copy and paste it into the field that is the requirement, like this, and like this. Okay. So because you're looking at this feed right now, it shows that it's live. And so if I press that, it pushes it there. But if I press it inside of, for preview, it does also show that source. So we've got this system down, and the short names are working, which is amazing because now when the numbers change, the inputs will all move with the sources and not with the numbers. So great tip. This is why YouTube and our communities are, super helpful, because these like little pro tips that show up, and I would never have known it unless somebody had said so. So keep those coming. Now, the only other one I'm assuming is this is supposed to be preview and program 6, by the way. And this is the start screen, but I'm not changing this. So if I load the start screen into here, and I'll show you vMix again. See, start screen is here, so I have preview is loaded as input 6, which is, I'm not changing that one, although I will change the short name. So the short name for this input is called starting. And so let's go to here, and I'm going to call it, instead of input 7, I'm going to call it starting. And then I'm going to say feedback starting. Oh, nuts. Starting. And then the next button, I'm also going to say, instead of input 7, starting. So now that should move with that feed as well. So that's great. Okay, so I'm happy with the way that this is coming along. I think that this creates a whole lot more versatility in terms of switching inputs. And now I can standardize some of these inputs and simplify. Instead of manipulating inputs like raw camera feeds, I can create, what I did was I created blank inputs and built them with layers as I saw fit. And so I can build like a layer. I'm sorry, I want to show you that. So I can build layers and press these buttons and basically call those output layers and build them however I want. There are some checks and balances that I might suggest that you consider integrating. But what I love about this is when I call this overlay now, notice how only one light is lit up, because I'm calling the overlay. I'm not calling multiple inputs. And so before, when I would call a scene like this, it would show input 4 and input 1 because the P200 is online and is being shown through that input. Now, this is overlay, technically overlay 37. And so that's what this preview or program button 4 is, basically overlay output. I'm so sorry, output 37 instead of 2 outputs, 2 cameras, which means now when I switch, it will only ever show 2 lights on program preview, which is how a typical video switcher is going to work. You're going to build your outputs and then just call that output. It still gives me the flexibility to throw my overlays on top of that and still cut my outputs as I see fit. But it also means, though, now I need to edit the playlist because the playlist is going to be wrong. So I am going to share with you my desktop once again. And this is the vMix playlist that I used to use. All right. So you can see $1.30, $1.35, 35 seconds, 20 seconds. So just kind of change it up. I'm going to eliminate all of those now. And I'm going to scroll down to these sources because these are my final overlays. And I'm going to say I want 200, then 110, then back to 200, then to P4K, and then back to 200. So the loop would continue. Okay. So we say loop, begin at the beginning. Don't need to clear overlays, and Bob is your uncle. So now we double click on these, and the duration, don't change starting position because that's not what you want to do. I want to change my duration. So the first one was $1.30. So we can say 30. We can even select the transition if we want. I just like a simple cut. I also want this one to basically be $1.30, which I don't know why it was a 35, but let's just make it 30 for normalcy's sake. And then these ones were set to 30 seconds or 25 seconds. So I kind of like 25 actually. So I'm going to set them as 25. And then I'm going to hit close. And now when I hit my playlist button on, it starts the playlist. Okay. And in vMix, you can, the playlist button turns red. And on my X keys, okay, so if I were to throw, you can call other cameras, by the way, when playlists are going. So the playlist button light is on, all right, meaning that the playlist is underway, and it's the first scene. The playlist will go regardless of what else you call. So if I cut here and I leave it for the next minute, it will cut to camera 2, which is the 110. So sometimes I make this mistake where I end the show, but the playlist keeps going, and then all of a sudden I'm back on camera because the timer is out. So I like the fact that the X keys now has feedback telling me the playlist is on. And when I hit off, the playlist being off, that light will disappear. So that's super convenient that that's what's going on here. So as it cycles through the cameras, we'll wait and see how this actually is working. But as we cycle through cameras, you're going to see those cameras change. Now, my only complaint about playlists in this regard is that it doesn't load the next camera in preview, right? So you would think that if it loads the next camera in preview, I'd be able to kind of like look and see, make sure that shot looks good. But it doesn't do that. It just puts them in program. Okay, so it's just one camera after another, puts them in program, and that's how that works. So playlist is on. Okay, there we go. So we just changed to camera 2. So now we're gonna have 25 seconds here while we're in camera 2, and then it should change back on its own without me switching it, which gives a little variety when it comes to actually watching the show. So hopefully you like that. Companion is the best. Companion is a very useful tool. I'll put it that way. There are some rivals out there, and I do want to kind of talk about their integration as well. So we are going to go down that road soon, but just not today. Hey, does BirdDog or New Tech have any network white papers floating around? There are white papers out there. We can give you a brief overview, but we do have some in terms of like best practices. I think New Tech does have one as well. Email us at help@birddog.tv. That would be the easiest way for you to, hey, could you guys send me the best practice, BirdDog networking best practices? We get that all the time, and we'll ship that out to you. So just, reach out to those guys, and we can absolutely, by all means, get you a copy of that for sure.